Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for The Curse of the Spellstone, an episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe produced by Filmation Studios. Today's episode may not be one of the best episodes of the series, but it is one I have very fond memories of. The Curse of the Spellstone, written by Mark Scott Zicree, a writer who I feel had a fantastic grasp of the series. Really good writer. He only wrote 3 episodes: The Curse of the Spellstone, Reign of the Monster, and Ordeal in the Darklands, but all 3 episodes have a very definitive dark side to them. I think that is largely due to Mark and numerous other writers at the time working from the original series Bible and the eventual series Bible written by Robbie London. The feel of a lot of the earlier material is far darker than what we would eventually get with season 2 of the show. One has only to look at episodes like this one, The Dragon Invasion, Wizard of Stone Mountain, and many others to see that the writers had a less friendlier version of Eternia in their minds. I mean, the main villain, as it were, in this episode is a living organism that causes death by suffocation. Yikes. This episode was loosely based on the Filmation script premise Eternia's Ordeal, one of many initial ideas conjured up by the staff writers at Filmation, primarily Robbie London. Some really unique and rarely used Shooky Levy music in this opening. It's very atmospheric. In the original story, Eternia's Ordeal, angry citizens plan to revolt against the royal family when a series of storms threaten Eternia. And as this episode proceeds, you will see the parallels. So the first draft of this script was delivered on December the 13th, 1982, quite a few years ago. The script underwent 6 rewrites, but that was actually common with a lot of the earlier scripts. Some of these rewrites occurred simply because characters' names changed, see Gorpo to Orko, and some rewrites occurred due to characters being phased out, such as Bug-Off and the other Lizard Man, not the one in the series. And we've just seen Skeletor and Evil Lyn taking care of business, securing the Spellstone. Evil Lyn, who plays a more important role than Skeletor in this episode. And if anyone can decipher her evil spell, Otto Redunde Serenadum Ardor, I'll give you £1,000. Actually, I won't. So yeah, here we are at the Royal Palace. Check out those interesting pieces of objet d'art. Worth a pretty penny, one would assume. As with many of the earliest episodes of the series, our first visit to the Royal Palace has Orko working his magic. Interestingly, in the script he was still referred to as Gorpo up until December the 15th, 1982. Be sure to look at Gorpo in these opening moments. His scarf is kind of drawn with a mouth. I think it's probably almost definitely simply for comedic effect. Thinking about it, I'm surprised they didn't use that visual trick more in the series. They often stuck to their guns with regards to the way Orko's scarf covered his face. Be sure to look at the poses here of King Randor and Man-at-Arms. Firstly, Man-at-Arms is holding his club, I'll talk about that in a second, but check out Randor's hand placed on Man-at-Arms' shoulder, which is not there in the following shot. Oh, and here Man-at-Arms claims that his weather-controlling satellite will make them Masters of the Seasons. Well, that works better for me than calling the heroes the Masters of the Universe. He-Man and the Masters of the Seasons. And so yeah, Man-at-Arms' club. In the model sheet of Man-at-Arms and the character turnaround, he was illustrated with his club in hand. Sometimes Filmation, in order to cut costs, would simply use a model sheet pose in a shot. However, when they did this with Man-at-Arms, his club would sometimes appear, which was a really silly mistake for them to make. One of the things I always laugh about is the cliched line, "I thought it was only a legend." It pops up a few times in the series and numerous other cartoons of the time. After Prince Adam says the line, he lowers his head almost like he's embarrassed to say it.
The Spellstone.
The Spellstone? I thought it was only a legend.
The reason I say it's a cliche is that it just helps create a lot of backstory without actually having to write any backstory. So yeah, Adam says it, he's embarrassed, time to change it to He-Man. Very interesting variation on the transformation here with Prince Adam posed like he would be during the stock footage at Castle Grayskull. Check it out. It's funny, the transformation went on to become such a standout moment in each episode and the series, and yet in the script it's often written in one of the most simple ways because the writers were just calling for the moment that Prince Adam would transform into He-Man. For example, in this script it reads, Prince Adam has the power sword drawn by the power of Grayskull. With appropriate fireworks, Adam is changed into He-Man. I have the power. He points the power sword at Cringer, there is a flash, and Cringer is transformed into Battlecat. It's a pretty simple description given what you see on screen is so much more. Now look at this shot of Evil Lyn and Skeletor coming up. Evil Lyn is missing her gauntlets. That is wrong. And Skeletor is missing the straps on his back. That is also wrong. Someone in the art department was clearly having a very bad day. Next to Nadira from Evil Lyn's plot, this may be one of Evil Lyn's best disguises because with it she achieves a great deal. As she beautifully says here, a voice in the crowd can do more damage than even this storm.
A voice in the crowd can do more damage than even this storm.
Beautiful. Although not named during the episode, the old lady that Evil Lyn transforms herself into is called Xenia in the script. And somewhat uniquely, from this point on, she isn't referred to as Evil Lyn in the script, just Xenia. Well, until she transforms back, that is. So another way you can tell this is an early script is that Orko gets left behind at the palace. If this were a season 2 episode, you could guarantee 100% that he would be tagging along, causing a little bit of crazy mischief here and there. As for this big pink creature, in the script it's merely called a serpent, but when it shows up again in Double-Edged Sword, it's given a slightly more appropriate name, a spider saw, which I think works so much better. And they're saved thanks to electricity. It would have been all the same if the spider saw dropped the attack track into the lava, presuming that is lava, which it must be, it's the region of flame. I absolutely love this panning shot here. We get to see a unique view of the royal palace. Plus check out all the details, the beams of light shining through the thick cloud. It's a beautifully painted background and it really shows just how vast the surrounding ground of the royal palace is. Here we see Man-at-Arms appear in shot floating on a blue platform. There he is. But we never see the firefighting machine in all its glory. Is it floating? Is it on treads? We simply don't know.
Spellstone, do my bidding.
Now, if you watch this footage frame by frame, I swear Man-at-Arms takes the full force of that lightning blast. Ouch. Teela has her hands on the controls, so I guess that's maybe why she takes a brunt of it. I like the shots of Evil Lyn with the fire behind her, a very dramatic, definite choice made by the storyboard artist. Speaking of storyboards, the artist for this episode was Hal Sutherland, whose name you'll know from being one of the 3 founders of Filmation, alongside Lou Scheimer and Norm Prescott, and for being the production director on the first season of He-Man. Although never name-checked in the episode, these 3 prominent villagers actually have names in the script. The old man is named, get ready for this, Old Zack. The young man, his son is not called Young Zack, he's called Jamar. And finally, the young woman is Jamar's wife, Bran. Jamar is actually quite a heroic sounding name, isn't it? Jamar and the Masters of the Season, something like that. I love how dramatic this entire scene is with the old Zack. No, you must be mistaken. Plus the lightning has a flair for the dramatic, only chiming in once old Zack has actually said something. Oh, and before I forget, Bran, the young woman, is voiced by Jay Scheimer, Lou Scheimer's wife. Incidentally, Lou Scheimer is voicing both old Zack and Jamar. And yeah, the heroes have arrived at the temple. Actually, where's the attack track? Maybe there's parking around the back or something? And here we have Skeletor and Trapjaw suddenly showing up in this episode. Skeletor unleashes his hover robots, Robot Knights. I always prefer the latter term, I think it sounds so much cooler. I also like to refer to them as Skeletor's cannon fodder because all they usually end up doing is getting trashed by the heroes. I mean, there's a spring there, and look at them, they're trashed already. Usually, primarily, it's He-Man or Ram-Man doing the damage, though here we see Battlecat notch up a few of his own on this occasion, treating this particular hover robot like one big cat toy. Now this is the part of the episode that kind of reminds me of the script premise Eternia's Ordeal, which I mentioned earlier. Here we have the citizens of Eternia rebelling against the royal family. However, here it is Evil Lyn leading the way, something that Teela figures out due to the tone of Evil Lyn's voice. I find it somewhat funny that Teela recognises Evil Lyn's voice, given that both Teela and Evil Lyn are voiced by the same actress, the fantastic Linda Gary. Random fact, Gerald Fortin, who worked as a character design artist, layout artist and sales department artist, and illustrated the Masters of the Universe newspaper strip, actually illustrated the layout for this scene with Teela throwing the bowler at Evil Lyn. And yeah, finally bound, Evil Lyn reveals herself, although she could have done it as soon as old Zack located the Horak. She didn't need to maintain the illusion. Now, the citizens obviously react with fear, but why did none of them try to stop her throwing the Horak? Maybe it's because she catches them off guard. And the Horak begins growing. And coming up, this is such an underrated action scene. I love it. Here we have an organism pursuing the heroes, and it's growing and it's getting bigger and it's entering the palace, and we're thinking, okay, it's obviously a threat, but what's the worst it can do? Then King Randor says this.
The creeping Horak. Long ago it was used to punish criminals. They'd be locked in their houses. The Horak would grow over it until all the air was squeezed out.
Terrifying. Oh, coming up, a great transition scene, straight into the action. Are you ready? Let's go. Boom, I love that. The way He-Man just comes out of a pile of hover robots straight into the theme song. Fantastic. Okay, so while all of this necessary action takes place, let's acknowledge the fact that in the script, Filmation actually refer to death. But not like the problem with Power does in Season 2. No, here we have it explicitly stated that criminals were suffocated to death. That's hideous. I mean, it's really pretty awful for a Saturday morning cartoon. I remember as a kid being somewhat startled by this admission of cruelty because it shows just how at one point the Eternian justice system worked. Very archaic. I should mention that in the original script, during his battle with the hover robots, He-Man was supposed to use his shield to destroy many of them. Now, as we know, his shield only appears in one episode, She-Demon of Phantos. This is a fun little scene with Battlecat and goes a long way when compared to many, many other episodes in showing some of his heroic bravado. The fact that he laughs at the end of the scene always makes me smile. Also, the dialogue reminds me of the fighting tiger we saw in the DC Comics Masters of the Universe limited series. This scene always makes me go, huh? When Skeletor shows He-Man the events unfolding at the Royal Palace, the most powerful man in the universe is shocked and exclaims, Teela, but doesn't make mention of his mother and father. You would think he'd say, King Randor, Queen Marlena, or even drop the ball and say, Mother, Father. Sadly here, no one name checks Man-at-Arms or Orko. Does no one care about this little double act? This image of Skeletor holding a lever that can only spell trouble for the heroes is an image I always recall from this episode, as it appeared as a 2-sticker setup in the much celebrated Panini sticker album. Such a great image. The heroes are pretty messed up there, but He-Man is of course the first to his feet. I like the way the Temple of the Fire People just happens to have a large valve to let water flow into an underground cavern. And as the water cascades towards the heroes, Battlecat roars and Act 1 comes to a close. And here we are in Act 2. If you go back to Act 1 and look at the shot in which Skeletor turns the large valve, check out Trapjaw's jaw. It's incorrectly illustrated and actually gives him a jaw under his metallic jaw. That's not the way it works.
There's just one way out, He-Man.
I love the way we hear Skeletor's voice echo throughout the caverns. It really sets the tone of the scene, and the fact that Skeletor very much has the upper hand. And speaking of Trapjaw again, in that 2 shot with Skeletor, his jaw was green. I don't know what's going on with him in this episode. And the heroes continue to run, fly, bounce throughout the caverns. Will they survive? Almost definitely. The funny thing about these shots of the heroes running through the caverns, if you look carefully, there are only a few backgrounds, but different framing and camera moves helps make it seem like an endless maze. Ah, this scene. Our friends at the Royal Palace seek escape, but the Horak keeps coming. It appears that not even a regular, not so convincingly strong door can stop it. Now, I love this upcoming camera move towards Teela. There's great drama with the music followed by a transition and then into the He-Man theme song. That camera move, the dramatic music, the transition, and our heroes ready for action as the theme song plays. I'm guessing I'm the only person who cares about that. And it's time for He-Man to make a trap door. Luckily for him, there's a giant boulder nearby. Really nice animation here of He-Man picking up the boulder. It goes from a sequence based on stock to a nice piece of animation showing He-Man holding the weighty boulder over his head. Man, seeing these characters together, He-Man, Battlecat, Ram-Man and Stratos, such an awesome combination of characters that really do take us back to the earliest roots of the Masters of the Universe toy line and those 7 awesome Mark Tex era mini comics. Goodness, I love those.
Finally, someone on our side.
And out of the frying pan and into the fire people. Always love the way Ram-Man just ducks back down. Nice and simple animation that is used to comedic effect. And the creeping Horak has now penetrated the not so convincingly strong doors. I'm guessing that the Eternians are going to have to start running again. but not before Teela leaps into action. Interesting, somewhat unique animation here of Man-at-Arms saving Teela. Physically expressive, it's not bad animation at all. It's a case of some frames are held longer than others, and then he just quickly darts out of shot. And here we have the Fire People, who are often forgotten about characters in the series, even though they feature rather prominently in this particular episode. They are an entire race of people that appear to be comprised of fire. You don't get much cooler than that, or hotter. And the reason they probably never appeared again is that if you look, even when they stand still, they are animated on 2 frames back and forth. So that would have been very time consuming for the camera operator to shoot those cells. And before you ask, the see-through effect on their bodies would have been easily achieved. These characters were painted with red translucent paint, no special effects on this occasion. Surprising for Filmation given how much they love their special effects. Actually, that reminds me, back in the earliest development of this episode, Tom Tataranaouis designed the look of the Fire People, and his version of King Helios was spectacular. He illustrated this concept piece of King Helios sat on his throne. He was human in appearance, muscle-bound of course, like all Eternians, and sported an impressive head of hair and beard. His costume had a flame motif rather than him being made of flame. He also had a small pet dragon, like he does in the episode, sat by his side. And we're back at the palace once more. The good guys are now running out of rooms, as King Randall will tell us. Someone said to me once, why didn't they just find another exit? Well, at this point, the Horak has enveloped the exterior of the palace, so they're simply running about internally as best they can. This little battle between He-Man and King Helios features some really nice direction. The best is when we see the 2-shot of He-Man using the Sword of Power to strike the sword King Helios wields from his grasp. And yes, Stratos still isn't having much luck with that flying, flame-breathing creature. I would love to have seen a little more of the confrontation between Battlecat and the panther-like creature made of flame. Even Battlecat said it packed a wallop. Ting wham! I love the way that sequence is animated. He-Man looks great. The serpent is back, and he clearly means business. I mentioned Tom Tataranaouis designing the Fire People. He actually designed this creature too, so he obviously had a fair amount of input into the visuals of this particular episode. Now, originally, in the script, He-Man uses a staff that belongs to one of the Fire People to prop open the serpent's mouth as it prepares to devour the king. Whereas here, He-Man just throws a boulder into the creature's mouth, and if you look carefully, you can see the boulder actually knocks out some of the creature's teeth. Nasty. And sadly, this is the last we see of the Fire People. In the original script, King Helios returns He-Man's kindness by repairing the attack track, which had previously been damaged by the earlier Spidersaur attack. It was a quick scene and demonstrated the magic of his fire abilities, but it was removed for time. So, back at the Royal Palace, and now we're in the very last room. I think we're going to have to face facts. The King and Queen, Man-at-Arms, Teela and Orko are going to die. A rather bleak end to this episode. We see somewhat of a mistake here. The Royal Palace not covered by any of the Horak at all. I like the way these villagers don't seem to be that scared of Skeletor, Evilin and Trapjaw. They're confronting them and they're ready to fight. Also, whilst all these events have been taking place, have the villagers and Evilin just been stood outside the Royal Palace this entire time? And now we get to see Skeletor sporting his own Sword of Power. Very cool. Now, of course, we all wanted to see Skeletor wield his own power sword, much like his action figure, but this was something that Filmation decided not to pursue, which is a shame. I genuinely love the 2 halves of the power sword story, and would love to have seen it introduced into this series. And so with Skeletor disarmed, Evilin unleashes the power of the Spellstone, and our heroes are in trouble. Oh, we nearly see He-Man's ear, something the artists at Filmation seem to want to constantly hide. You'll see some episodes in which He-Man is falling and his hair still doesn't blow up quite enough to reveal his ears. And thus the threat of the Spellstone is over.
A person doesn't need superpowers to be a hero. All he needs is bravery.
I feel that He-Man's moral lesson is a little too forced into the script here. I get why it's here, but it feels like this could have been saved for the actual moral segment post-episode. Be sure to look at Trapjaw during these final scenes. For the first and only time in the series, he is actually depicted with his saw blade attachment. Much like his claw, it was only ever used once in all of his appearances. And now we get one final action scene demonstrating He-Man's pretty impressive running ability. I like the way it cuts between He-Man's pursuit of the Spellstone and the Horak advancing on the heroes. Good stuff, good drama. I love He-Man's voice here, his heave-ho. Listen to John Irwin as he utters this line.
Got it!
It sounds like he's really struggling. It's a terrific and somewhat amusing piece of voice acting. Skeletor and his evil warriors escape, and He-Man and his friends have won the day. Hurrah! I'm not sure how the Spellstone seemingly exploding results in the creeping Horak vanishing and, according to He-Man, the Spellstone being transported back to the Temple of the Fire People, but we'll go with it. Look at this shot here. Ram Man appears to be ridiculously short, and is Battle Cat floating? And this episode ends with Orko performing a trick and it going wrong, which didn't happen as many times as you would think. Yes, these tricks went wrong, but they didn't always close out the show. Looking at this shot, I think this episode has more balcony usage than any other episode of the series. There you go, I saved the best piece of trivia until last. I always love these moments in the series when you see the characters not caught up in the plot or the latest threat, just simply enjoying life at the Royal Palace. And our friends at the Royal Palace laugh after a day which saw them battle against the grim spectre of death numerous times. They really do get over all that they go through in a day very quickly, don't they? And now it's time for a moral segment, and it's Man-at-Arms. Actually, he's fixing the sky sled that Prince Adam and Cringer were fixing in the episode Teela's Quest. I think it's time they face facts. This particular sky sled is never going to fly again. It was always odd when a moral segment like this wouldn't reflect the actual episode. Here Man-at-Arms is talking about how Orko's tricks go wrong and that it's not always good to fool people. I just feel that He-Man's moral prior to him saving the day would have been far better. So, The Curse of the Spellstone. It's a very good action-based episode. Very little in the way of character development, but it deals, if not a little haphazardly at times, with two storylines at the same time. There's a sense of urgency throughout the episode, and that is one of the strongest points. It's a good, old-fashioned action-adventure episode. And that's the end of this episode commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.